Without further ado, I'd like to welcome and introduce Cecilia Munoz, Assistant to the President and Director of the White House Domestic Policy Council.
Thank you very much, Felice. Buenos días. Good morning, everybody. Y bienvenidos. This is really very special to me. It's lovely to see all of you here. It's a great honor for me, on behalf of President Obama, to welcome you to the White House Conference on Connecting the Americas. It's very exciting for me to see you all here as the hija de Bolivianos. This is a particularly special moment. This is a time when we focus on and celebrate something which we know very well, which is the interconnectedness of the Americas and how much we are connected by ties of commerce, by ties of culture, by ties of family. And so in advance of the upcoming Summit on the Americas, the White House, the Department of Commerce, and the Council of the Americas has come together to host today's event. And the idea is to engage you, business and community leaders from around the country, on the President's vision and agenda for creating an economy that's built to last in this country while engaging our partners across the hemisphere really in an unprecedented way. We're trying to build on the theme of this year's summit, Connecting the Americas, Partners in Prosperity, to really underscore the real connections and linkages between the 50 million Hispanics in the United States and the cultural and economic ties that we have to the rest of the Americas, to strengthen the relationship between all of you and this administration so that we can all continue to find ways to partner up to promote greater economic prosperity both in this country and across the hemisphere. So you all know the facts, right? The Western Hemisphere is the destination for about 42% of U.S. exports. The President hosted the Brazilian President here at the White House on Monday, an ally that can now boast it has the 6th largest economy in the world. And in 2011 alone, more than $61 billion in remittances were sent by members of the Latin American and Caribbean communities across the United States to their families and friends in their countries of origin. That's huge commerce right there. And as the President has said, we believe that what's good for the Americas is ultimately good for the United States. Through regional cooperation based on partnership and shared responsibility, we are working effectively with an increasingly strong set of partners to address key challenges facing the people of the Americas, from energy to security and more inclusive economic growth, while also advancing the interests of the United States both here and abroad. And as the President has talked about what's good for the Americas being good for the United States, I think the inverse is also true, particularly with respect to the Hispanic community in the United States. When we are prospering and thriving as a community, it has a positive impact on Latin America. And that's particularly important to me. I lead the Domestic Policy Council. I work on the domestic sphere, not the international sphere. But we, throughout our work, are really aware of this sense of connectedness. And the work that we do economically here at home, particularly as it affects the Latino community, has real impacts on Latin America, not the least of which is through those remittances that we talked about, but also obviously through entrepreneurship, through commerce, and through connection. So as we start to turn a corner economically, we also understand that we have a long way to go across the country in general and also across the Latino community. We're not just to recover from the worst recession since the Great Depression, but to create the economy that's built to last that you've heard the President talking about. There are some important indicators. Nearly 4 million jobs created in the last 2 years, manufacturers hiring at levels that we haven't seen since the 1990s, an American auto industry that's back on top. But we understand that there's a lot more work to be done, and you'll be hearing particularly from some of our speakers today that as the engines of our economy, small businesses are at the heart of the President's efforts. Administrator Karen Mills is going to be here later this morning, and she has really some important things to say about the work that's going on in the small business sector in the Latino community. That's really very exciting. So the economic picture in the United States is incredibly important to the Hispanic community. The solutions, the ways in which we're trying to drive the economy forward, particularly through the business sector and the small business sector, is a place where the Hispanic community are real agents of change and a real growth sector. These are important investments that we're making in the business sector, but we're also making important investments in the labor force in making sure that we are doing what we should be doing with respect to our educational system and our worker training systems to make sure that workers in the United States are prepared for the jobs which are coming online in this new economy. That's work that we help direct at the Domestic Policy Council along with the National Economic Council. And it obviously helps segment of the workforce that is Latino. It obviously helps strengthen the workforce overall and ultimately helps propel the successful economy of the future that we're working to grow. And I should just point out that among the sort of domestic pieces of work, the $61 billion in remittances that I mentioned earlier are now protected by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which for the first time ever is overseeing the operations of remittance service providers and payday lenders. Now, someone sending money overseas to their family, to their friends, can be guaranteed the same protections as if they were using their check card. That is an incredibly important development in this community and for our families abroad. So finally, I would be remiss as someone who's worked in the field of immigration policy for 25 years if I didn't mention that the notion of immigration reform, the priority around immigration reform, is really essential to this notion of an economy that's built to last. We ultimately understand, and the President understands very deeply, that it must be a priority to reform our immigration system as part of this effort to build the economy that's built to last. We cannot be as successful as we need to be building the economy of the future on a broken immigration system. That remains a priority for this President. We continue to struggle with the logjam on immigration reform in the Congress, on the DREAM Act in the Congress. But this President is determined to see the day when we are all here celebrating an immigration reform that he can sign into law, and we will continue to work towards that day. So I just want to close again by welcoming you, by thanking you for your engagement in this work, to say that you have the strongest possible advocate in President Obama, who really understands the interconnectedness within the hemisphere and our interconnectedness as a community with family and friends and business partners all across the hemisphere. And our job is to make sure that this community and all Americans continue to build on the connections and partnerships throughout the region to create greater prosperity in this country and really throughout the Americas. That's what today is about. It's what our work in the summit is about. And we're looking forward to carrying on that work with all of you. So now it's my distinct privilege to introduce someone who works every single day to open up markets and support businesses all across the country, to promote exactly the kind of positive relationship in the Americas that we're going to be talking about over the next several days. He is a business leader, a leader of the business sector in his own right, and now our Secretary of Commerce, John Royson.
Good morning to all of you. It is a great, great pleasure to be here. Thank you, Cecilia. Cecilia presented this so wonderfully well and so powerfully, and a testament to what she's been doing for so long. I was delighted to be asked to join you this morning. I want to thank everyone, Cecilia, but also the entire team at the Domestic Policy Council. And thanks also to Eric Farnsworth at the Council of Americas. So it's a great pleasure to welcome you to this important, truly important, I think, conference on connecting the Americas. And it is a real pleasure to see business and community leaders from across the country getting here. This is really something. And I know getting in this morning wasn't so easy, but I commend you on working your way through a long line and getting in the door. Some of you will know that I've lived for a long time in Southern California. That's where my family grew up. That's where I was the CEO for nearly 20 years, Southern California Edison Company, so that range, and Edison International. And what that really means, and it's true across so much of our country, every day in my company, the employees of my company, the people that increasingly joined the company across the greater Los Angeles region, the entire region, I saw daily the extraordinary contributions that were made by Hispanic leaders, workers, and families. And it is absolutely abundantly clear, as you know, that this wonderful diversity, this wonderful growth in this population is an incredibly powerful force in our economy. The Census Bureau, that's part of the Commerce Department, does a survey every 5 years of business owners in the country. And here is, so we're in the middle of it right now, it's on our minds. The last survey, which was from 2002 to 2007, showed that sales at Hispanic-owned businesses grew by 55%. 55% over 5 years to $350 billion. Now that's really stunning growth. It's not that we see that regularly in other elements of our economy. This is really striking. So this year, we're underway with this again. I don't know the results yet. The people that do this in the Census Bureau are very, very precise in the way they do these things. But it's the 5-year survey, and as you all know, there can be little doubt across our country that it will once again show striking growth. But it's much more. It isn't just growth that way, not just the economy. The fact is that people and cultures from throughout the Western Hemisphere are, in large part, I think, the story of America. President Obama, as Cecilia said, understands this. That's why he is going to Colombia tomorrow for the Summit of the Americas. And everyone here understands it too. We have put together a great day, and I want to thank you in advance for your contributions to the dialogue. I think that the discussions will resolve today around 2 general themes, and I want to touch on each of those. So first, we need to ensure a strong foundation right here at home. So let me give 3 examples. We need to make sure college is more affordable and more accessible for everyone. So already the administration has increased the top Pell Grant sizes from $900 to $5,000. Then we need to make sure that our entrepreneurs and business owners get the tools that they need to succeed. And I know that we just had a record year here at the Small Business Administration in lending, as Administrator Mills will, I think, attest this morning. And then we need to make sure that our workers can get the training that they need to land good jobs. So this includes major efforts like the proposed Community College to Career Fund. And then the second theme of the day, which builds on what I've just described, and that is to strengthen our economic ties throughout the Americas. And again, I want to give some examples here. We need to build on the record year we just had of $2.1 trillion, $2.1 trillion, 1 year, just this last year, 2011, in U.S. exports. We have new trade agreements in the pipeline for Colombia and Panama, as Ambassador Kirk will confirm later. Then we need to ensure that our private sector can play a really strong role in infrastructure growth abroad, not just here in the U.S., but abroad. And it's clear that U.S. businesses can help with everything from roads to energy to help lift people out of poverty and into the middle class. And then we need to encourage companies throughout the Americas to see value the other way around, not exports, but the value of investing right back here in the United States. So throughout the Commerce Department's Select USA initiative, which is strongly supported by the President, we're doing just that. Invest here, build your business here, put people to work here. And finally, we need to address challenges that all countries share, like climate change and global security. And above all, I strongly believe, I'm sure you do as well, that we must do everything possible to strengthen person-to-person relationships. That, I think, is the key to our success. Earlier this week, we had a powerful example of that. Brazil's President Dilma Rousseff came, and I led a meeting of the U.S.-Brazil CEO Forum. We discussed how we can partner in industries like aviation to build on our record year of this past year of over $100 billion $100 billion in bilateral trade, U.S. to Brazil and back. We also talked about bringing more students from Brazil to come and study in the U.S., a goal that both of our presidents share. And of course, we talked about how our countries can work together to support the Brazil 2014 World Cup and the Brazil 2016 Olympics. And it may possibly not surprise you to know that I will not be competing in the World Cup. It's incredible. However, what I'm really pleased to say is that, as I announced on Monday, that I will be going on my first ever trip to Brazil this fall for the next U.S.-Brazil CE Forum meeting. We need more of these interactions, and that's why the work that we do together, including the work you will be doing here today, is so important. Together we can build more bridges through the Americas. Together we can take these next steps to promote greater prosperity and more jobs. And together we can ensure an even brighter future for the people throughout the Western Hemisphere. So, again, I thank you all for being here today. It really is wonderful that you gather this way. Now I'm happy to turn the floor over to Dan Restrepo of the National Security Staff, who serves as Senior Director for Western Hemisphere Affairs. And I thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, Secretary Bryson. Thank you all very much for being here. Bienvenidos a la Casa Blanca. I have the easiest job here today. I was given the task of explaining to this room why the Americas matter, which is not a particularly tough thing to do. You all know why the Americas matter. The Americas matter because they are our home, first and foremost. No region, no set of interactions with any other region in the world affects the daily lives of people in the United States more than our interactions with the countries and the people of the rest of the Americas. The majority of the U.S. Foreign-born population is now from the rest of the Americas, as you all well know. It is, as you've heard and will continue to hear, the destination for more than 40% of U.S. exports, exports that are growing faster to the Americas than to any other region of the world. The theme of the summit, the theme of today's conversation, is about connecting the Americas. That has been at the heart of the President's agenda since before, frankly, he went to the first Summit of the Americas in 2009 in Trinidad and Tobago. The President has been guided from the beginning by a very simple premise, that what is good for the people of the Americas is good for the United States. That has been, across a wide range of issues, how this President has engaged with partners throughout the region. It has been an intense engagement. Over the course of the last 10 days alone, the President has hosted here at the White House our three largest trading partners in the Western Hemisphere, the President of Mexico, the Prime Minister of Canada, and the President of Brazil. These are amongst the, I believe I got the number right, his bilateral interactions on Sunday with President Santos of Colombia, which will be his fourth with a Colombian president, will be his 30th with a leader in a bilateral setting with other leaders in the Americas. This is his fourth trip to the region. He will make his fifth in June, which will put him in good company as the President of the United States who has most visited the region in their first term in office. And that is engagement that you will see from the discussions later today, the panels that follow, and in Secretary Clinton's remarks this afternoon. Engagement that runs throughout our government. All but one cabinet secretary has visited the region on official business in the course of the past 3 years. Again, because the interactions with the region are more intense and more complex, because of how they affect our daily lives than with any other region in the world. You have the Secretary of Interior, you have the secretaries, you have the EPA, you have what are traditionally viewed as more domestically oriented institutions of the U.S. government actively engaged with partners throughout the region because the issues that they handle affect directly and do not respect the borders in the Americas. So creating this need and creating this interest for greater engagement, for sustained engagement. And again, across a wide range of issues. I'm not going to go into the details of this, but we have been working, again, from day one on the major challenges facing the region, on the issues of citizen security. We have unprecedented partnerships with Mexico, with Central America. The President launched an initiative back at the Summit of the Americas 3 years ago on the Caribbean Basin Security Initiative. That's now a $200 million investment the United States has made in security in the Caribbean over the course of the past 3 years. We are spending nearly double on an annual basis on citizen security in Central America than we were when the President came to office. And again, the delivery of, but more importantly, the fostering of partnership and cooperation with Mexico is at unprecedented levels and continuing to grow. And obviously, Colombia being the site of this summit is a shining example of what collaborative and cooperative efforts with the United States can yield in terms of citizen security in the Americas. Colombia today, compared to Colombia a decade ago, is a far better place. And it is a far better place, obviously, because of the hard work and sacrifice of the Colombian people and their government and their security forces, but also because of the contribution of the United States. And we believe that that kind of cooperation is the kind of cooperation that can help countries throughout the region. It will be the kind of cooperation that the President will be focused on building more of during his interactions with fellow leaders in Cartagena. We've also worked on energy and climate issues. At the last summit, the President launched the Energy and Climate Partnership of the Americas, a new way of doing business for the United States and the Americas, to reach out and say, we know we have increasingly capable partners. We know we have an increasingly shared set of challenges. Let's figure out how we can work those in a flexible fashion in ways that bring people to the table who want to work on particular issues, want to work on particular problems with the United States, and let's get to work. And let's leave ideology aside, and let's make sure we're focusing on the things that will make people's lives better on a day-in, day-out basis in the region. There's more than 40 projects underway under ECPA. We will see at this summit building upon that foundation to go even further, to improve, again, access to energy for consumers throughout the region in ways that, again, will change the way people live their lives and how they're affected day in and day out, not by esoteric debates, but rather concrete results. We've also worked very closely with Mexico on a transboundary agreement on hydrocarbons in the Gulf of Mexico, an unprecedented agreement that opens access to greater energy reserves and opens access to greater cooperation between the United States and Mexico in an area that has not always been the simplest in which to work. We have clean energy conversations and dialogues with our North American partners, but also with Brazil that we saw this week during the course of President Rousseff's visit and the tremendous strides made in biofuels and other areas, but also with Colombia, that is a growing clean energy partner as well. On development issues, the region has made remarkable progress that obviously we welcome, that is in our interest. Millions, tens of millions have moved from poverty to the middle class over the course of the last decade in the Americas as a result of a dedication to market-based economic principles, but principles that are also focused on increasing economic and social inclusion. Goals that we share. There are models that work in the region. We've embraced those models, and we've also embraced our responsibility. At the last Summit of the Americas, the major development issue, the major economic issue facing countries in the region at the time was the global economic crisis and the ability of international financial institutions to help countries weather that storm. The focus at the last summit was on the general capital increase for the Inter-American Development Bank. We, the United States, have played a very important leading role in doubling the lending capacity of the IDB over the course of the past 3 years, making good on the President's commitment in Trinidad to support the GCI, to make sure that the Inter-American Development Bank was there to fulfill its mission of supporting the poorest in our region, to create and sustain bottom-up economic growth that, again, is good for the people of the Americas and good for the United States. The U.S. economic recovery obviously is also an important piece of the puzzle of the economic development here in the Americas. Remittances play an enormous role in a number of countries in the region, greater than 10% of gross domestic product in more than a half dozen countries in the Caribbean and Central America. We've taken steps, again, underscoring the connectivity of the Americas, Wall Street reform legislation and the actions of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau to make remittances more transparent, more accountable, and more accessible for consumers here in the United States has real benefits in the region, underscoring the connectivity and the dedication that this president and this administration have made to deepening and enhancing our relationship over the course of the last 3 years here in the Americas. Again, you all know why the Americas matter. You're here because you understand the importance of the Americas. You understand the importance of the U.S. role in the Americas. We are an integral part of this region. We welcome the debate and discussion and focus of this summit, which again is on connecting the Americas and in looking for concrete ways to improve the lives of folks, to focus on getting things done, to improve people's lives, to address these central challenges in terms of economic development, in terms of citizen security, disaster response, poverty alleviation. Those are the issues that we've been working on, as you will hear from the panels that follow and the speakers that follow. We look forward to hearing your all's input on those same issues through the breakout sessions, because we very much value this as a conversation, as a discussion about how we can and how this president, as he goes to Cartagena tomorrow, as part of his sustained engagement with the Americas, can work to fulfill that basic promise of U.S. leadership in the Americas, to improve the people's lives throughout the region, and to continue to enhance U.S. standing in the region, which has seen a remarkable recovery over the last 3 years, from approval ratings in the 40s to approval ratings in the 70s for the United States. Again, because people understand that this president and this country are focused on how we can work together as equal partners to make people's lives better and to address the real opportunities and real challenges that still exist in the Western Hemisphere. So with that, I believe I am going to turn it over to a panel discussion very much on the economic opportunities here in the Americas, featuring Ambassador Kirk, our U.S. Trade Representative, Karen Mills from the Small Business Administration, Michael Comunez from the Department of Commerce, and Eric Farnsworth, I believe, is going to be moderating this discussion. And with that, again, let me thank the Commerce Department and the Council of the Americas for their sponsorship of this event. And again, to all of you for braving the entry process to this fine building to be with us here today and to get your input as we head to Cartagena for the 8th U.S. President visit to Colombia, the first one to overnight. And not only will we be there one, we will be there 2 nights. The first time a president of the United States will stay in Colombia, again, as a testament, I think, to the real and remarkable progress we've seen in that country through effective partnership with the United States. So thank you all very much, and over to the economic opportunity. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much, Dan. Congratulations on those comments, and thank you for your kind words about me. I want to add my welcome to those whom you've already heard from this morning, and to welcome all of you to what promises to be a stimulating conversation on the Americas in advance of the President and Secretary of State's travel to Cartagena, Colombia this weekend for the 6th Summit of the Americas. As mentioned, my name is Eric Farnsworth, and I have the privilege of heading the Washington office of the Council of the Americas, which is an organization dedicated to the promotion of democracy, open markets, and the rule of law throughout the Western Hemisphere. We are very pleased to have the opportunity today to co-host this program with the White House and the U.S. Department of Commerce, a program that includes a virtual who's who of administration officials dealing with the Western Hemisphere from numerous departments and agencies. I want to thank Secretary Bryson for his comments about me, and I also want to take note of the presence this morning of our chairman, Ambassador John Negroponte, who will be introducing Secretary Clinton later this afternoon. I'm particularly pleased to have the opportunity to host this session on the economic opportunities that we see collectively in the Americas. It's an important time in the region, as all of you know. As the leaders from the hemisphere prepare to gather together, the region in some ways looks better than ever. Economic growth has remained strong even in the midst of global economic crisis, and the middle class is growing. Poverty is tangibly and meaningfully being reduced. Latin America's share of global trade is increasing. Both traditional and non-traditional sources of energy are plentiful, remaking global energy markets as both deepwater drilling and onshore natural gas production, in addition to the well-known story of biofuels, increasingly come online. And in this 11th anniversary year of the Inter-American Democratic Charter, while the practice of democracy varies from country to country, democracy itself remains strong across the region and remains the only acceptable system of governance among the nations of the Summit of the Americas. The hemisphere is confident in its future, diversifying its relationships globally, and looking to cooperate more closely together to address issues of common concern. Certainly challenges do exist, including questions of sustainability linked to China's anticipated slowdown, questions of personal security we've heard a little bit already about this morning, an income gap that remains far too high, and the continued underinvestment in education that leaves far too much human capital untapped across the region. But there can be little doubt that the hemisphere has changed dramatically since the first Summit of the Americas in Miami in 1994 and the second summit in Santiago, both of which I had the privilege of participating in as a member of the Clinton administration. Summits that I believe directly contributed to the positive political and economic direction in which the hemisphere has moved since the end of the Cold War. And it's in the area of economic opportunity where the hemisphere really shines and where the United States has the most to gain through increased trade, investment, joint efforts on research and innovation, and a focus on competitiveness, including consolidated supply chains. And these are exactly the issues for discussion with our three panelists this morning. All of you know well our panelists by this stage of the administration. Ambassador Ron Brown is the U.S. Trade Representative, having successfully completed. Ron Kirk. Ambassador Ron Kirk. I apologize, sir. I'm still in the mind of the Clinton administration.
It's okay.
Having successfully completed the most recent trade agreements with Colombia and Panama and South Korea as well. And he is working diligently, as all of you know, to bring the Trans-Pacific Partnership home later this year. SBA Administrator Karen Mills, I hope I got your name correct.
You did.
Has a long and diverse career investing in and managing small businesses, and she is a true advocate for innovation, economic development, and job creation. And Commerce Department Assistant Secretary Michael Camuñez, who is instrumental in the implementation of the President's national export strategy, has been a longtime advocate for Hispanic business and indeed U.S. business overall. Each one of them brings an important perspective to the issues that we are discussing today. And so, in the words of those famous philosophers, the black-eyed peas, let's get it started. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please join me in welcoming to the podium Ambassador Ron Kirk.
Thank you, Derek. I appreciate that very much. Fortunately, I was a huge admirer. Ron Brown was a Secretary of Commerce during the Clinton administration, a great friend and mentor to many of us, who was tragically killed in a plane accident doing what he did best, and that was out promoting America around the world. He may have been the most energetic of what has been a string of extraordinarily capable commerce secretaries in embracing the notion that America had a lot to share with the world, and combining the best of government with our entrepreneurial talent and skills that he could go out and promote our country. So although it's a bit awkward, Eric, I don't mind being mistaken for Ron Brown at all. My job, many of you may not in fact know me, but I hope you'll know a little bit more about what I do. I'm privileged to lead the Office of the United States Trade Representative. It's one of the smaller agencies within the administration. It is housed within the Executive Office of the President. But we have the incredibly important job of advising the President and Congress on how we ought to expand our commercial relations around the world. And we principally have the responsibility, as opposed to Michael Commerce and Commerce, whom you'll hear from in a minute, who do export promotion. It's our job to go negotiate with other countries the terms and conditions by which we are going to let one another's goods come in our countries. Why is this relevant to this audience? You heard Dan Restrepo highlight some of President Obama's efforts to strengthen our engagement with South America in particular. And many of you will recall that 2 years ago in the State of the Union, the President noted his first foreign trip in 2011 would be to South America. And we went to Brazil and El Salvador and Chile. And interestingly enough, the first thing their presidents asked us to do was to pass trade agreements with Panama and Colombia, because they understood that would strengthen our presence in the entire region and would help strengthen the incredibly strong commercial relationship between all of South America and the United States. And based on that, but also on the President's understanding of the commitment of how important trade is to our number one objective, which is strengthening our economic recovery and putting Americans back to work, that it also is an incredibly powerful tool to lift millions of people out of poverty in many of our developing country partners and around the world and bring them into commerce. And with that, we were extraordinarily pleased because of the help of a number of people, a number of you in this room. And I have to note the presence of our former UN Ambassador, John Negroponte, who was an extraordinarily powerful voice and advocate for moving forward on these. Last October, we did something that at least no Congress has done, I think, in recent years, and Congress approved 3 trade agreements in one evening with Korea, with Colombia, with Panama. We renewed a critically important worker assistance program called Trade Adjustment Assistance, and renewed our generalized system of preferences. What this means, it's just more business between our hemispheres. Our trade in the Western Hemisphere is roughly $645 billion. That's a lot of money, and that's out of a total trade of about $2.1 trillion. But we think that that can grow exponentially. And with the work that we are doing to implement now the trade agreements with Colombia and Panama, that will give us an opportunity to have that trade even increase. You all are so critical to that because one of the lessons that we have learned in our efforts to double U.S. exports and help spur our job creation was finding out more about who our customers are, and our SBA administrator will talk more about that. But the reality is that of American businesses who export, and there are fewer than 300,000 companies in the U.S. who export, but 95% of them are what we define as small businesses. And helping small businesses to understand the power for you to grow your business by extending your sales to our friends and neighbors around the world is a great way for you to grow your business. And one of the strongest tools that we have in America is our incredible diversity. And so many of our exporters are exporting to countries where, frankly, you have friends, you have relatives, you have classmates, you have a discrete reason for why you sell to Mexico, El Salvador, Canada, or Ghana. But you have an opportunity to help us really exploit this relationship, particularly in South America and the Western Hemisphere. One of President Obama's goals was for us to double exports over a 5-year period of time, with the knowledge that if we could do that, that would lead to almost 2 million new jobs. And one of the hidden stories of our economic recovery is that trade, which is only 13% of our GDP, is contributing almost half of our job growth. Right now, we are on pace to meet the president's goal. We had a record year in exports last year of $2.1 trillion. We are above the pace to double that, but we can do even more by engaging you all in a conversation about how we can help you to find customers, to finance your products and sales, and to become a part of this export miracle. The opportunity for us is based on one premise, and I hope it doesn't sound too jingoistic, but I can tell you, having traveled around the world in my capacity as trade representative, the words made in America are still 3 of the most treasured words in the world. It is still one of the most powerful brands in the world. And principally because most consumers around the world really don't worry about food they put on the table if they know it's been grown in America. If they buy a product that you've made, most people have an implied presumption if it's made in America, this may actually work the way you told me it did. But just as critically, because we have such a strong rule of law, they also believe if something goes wrong, we kind of have this business ethic in America that we'll make it right. And against a world in which counterfeiting and piracy is rampant, that's a huge value proposition for you. If customers in these new emerging markets believe I have a chance to buy this from someone that I know is really going to stand behind it and make it work. Our job can sound much more esoteric, but everything we're doing just makes it cheaper, easier, faster for you to sell your goods into these markets. In the case of Colombia and Panama, I'll say this and I'll stop. They have been a part of what we call our preference program because these are countries we have worked to help them move people out of poverty. So for the last 15 years, 98% of what we buy from Colombia and Panama comes into the United States duty-free. 98% of what we sell into their countries, we pay duties anywhere from 15% to 75%. When that trade agreement goes into effect, most of those duties go to zero immediately. About 80% of them, and the rest of them will be phased out. You can figure out what that means. And while these are not the largest markets in the world, these are very important markets for us in the United States. We have an opportunity to sell over $2.5 billion of new goods and services into Panama and Colombia. So that's what we want to talk to you. I want to stop here because Administrator Mills will tell you a little bit more about what we're doing specifically to reach out to small businesses to bring you into our export efforts.
Well, thank you, Ron. And I've learned a lot working with Ron, with Ambassador Kirk, because it's right what he says. This Made in America brand is hot. And we see it in a lot of small businesses all around the country. And when I travel around the country, the number one thing they ask me for is a level playing field. And Ambassador Kirk and this president have been going all around the world creating a more level playing field for our American small businesses. And it is paying off. So I want to just talk today about 2 aspects. At the Small Business Administration, we worry about all our small businesses here, and particularly our Hispanic small businesses, which, by the way, are one of our fastest growing segments in small business. And last year, I'm very pleased to say that we had a record year in SBA loan guarantees. One of the things we do is we have a $90 billion portfolio of loan guarantees that are done through banks where the SBA steps up and guarantees a large portion of the loan. And last year I said more SBA loans than ever before in the history of the agency. And a big piece of that was $1.4 billion in loans to Hispanic-owned businesses, 3,500 Hispanic-owned businesses just last year. So that's a huge impact. And since 2009, the increase in our loans to Latino-owned businesses was 57% in the number of businesses and 132% in the dollars that went to these businesses. So we have a whole set of entrepreneurs, and I actually see some of my friends from traveling around the country here today, and thank you for taking the time for coming. We are now getting more money into the hands of small businesses in this country in record numbers, particularly in our fast-growing Hispanic-owned business segment. Now, let's talk about what we're here to talk about today in terms of what does that mean for exports? We are a very active part of the President's National Export Initiative because small businesses have so much export potential. So right now, one of the ways we participate is with export loans. And our export loan portfolio went up 50% in volume in the last year, 50%. So we are really significantly increasing the dollars behind our exporters. And we have some particular loan programs that we work together with XM Bank, and our individual loan programs you should look at if you're exporting. Export Express, we have 90% guarantees on some of them. The dollar limits on them, we were able to get raised to $5 million. Those loan products are up 23%. So you get the picture. We are really seeing and participating in a very strong growth trend among Hispanic-owned businesses, domestic and Hispanic-owned businesses, and all small businesses exporting. One of the folks who originally sort of pointed this out to me is here today, but I don't say, is Jose Lopez here? Yes, there you are. Hey, how are you? Nice to see you. So I went to Port Charlotte near Miami, and this was the time when Ron was trying to put that last finishing touch on the free trade agreements. And I said to Jose, what's this going to mean to you? And he described his company. So I think you changed the name, though. Now it's called Marketing Arm International. There you go. Well, he's been in business 19 years. And is Monica here? Monica Luna? Yeah, hey. So with his colleague, they run a business that is completely export-oriented. And what do they export? Environmentally friendly agri-products. Environmentally friendly agri-products, agribusiness products that we produce here. They've done business for 19 years, and early in his career, Jose, of course, worked in Latin America and used that market knowledge to build his company. When we were talking, he told me that he had a lender for years and years, and they stopped lending to him because he was an exporter. And when the credit crunch hit, a lot of people said, well, I don't want to take that kind of risk. So they pulled back, and he was able to come to the SBA, get an export-oriented loan, and that provided him to the stability that he needed to save his business because it was all an export business. And his export sales in 2011, I hear, are up 29%, so thank you. Yeah, see, so this is the example I'm talking about. And I have other examples, and many of you can step up and tell your story. But I want to just talk for a second about the potential. About 1 in 100 small businesses export in this country. And in the UK, that's 1 in 5. And in the EU, it's 1 in 4. So we know that we have, that small businesses can export. What do they need? They need market opportunity. When I travel around the country, and every week I'm in a different place, and I'm talking to somebody about how can we help your business? How can we put the wind at your back? They need to know where the markets are. One of the things that helps is the free trade agreements. Another thing that has helped is we have been able to put $30 million into state export agencies in the last year, and we've got another $30 million set of grants going out. This is thanks to the Small Business Jobs Act. It's kind of a one-time infusion to make sure that all of those export-oriented services that are around, Department of Commerce's, our services, the state export services, are aligned and linked for small businesses. So you can open one door and you will be able to find your way to all of the resources, whether it's loan products or advice. And we have launched a website called Business USA that is dedicated to small business with a particular emphasis on export coordination. You go on there, and you can find your way from XM Bank to SBA loans to advice and counseling. My last point is about advice and counseling, though. It's not all about the loans. We have evidence that shows if you're a small business owner and you have a long-term counselor, you have better sales, you have more profits, you have more longevity. So we need to make sure that you are connected to one of our 14,000 counselors all around the country. And I just need to say one word: free. Those services are free. And they will help you make a business plan, particularly for exporting. They will help guide you through the process and connect you to market opportunities. And one of the, we counseled 35,000 small businesses in export activity alone. Every year we counsel 1 million small businesses. Right now, we are cooperating with the Organization of American States and USAID and the State Department to take our model. We have 900 small business development centers, and Mexico and El Salvador and Colombia have asked for this model, and we have been working for a number of years to replicate those small business development centers, and they are operating now in some of these countries. And we have, at the University of Texas, San Antonio, something called our SBDC Global. And therefore, we can virtually connect small businesses to market opportunities that are in this region. So we are going to keep working. There's a number of ideas coming out of this conference that we are engaged in with the State Department. La Idea is another way we are connecting our small business development centers and your businesses to these market opportunities. The reason that that's so important is because, of course, small business are driving this economic recovery in this country, and exports, as Ambassador Kirk said, are the other key driver. We put that together, we put it in this region, which is one of the critical exporting regions, and we're going to be creating a lot of jobs and really one of the foundation stones of the economy that's built to last. Thank you.
Buenos días y bienvenidos. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be with you. My name is Michael Camuñez. I have the privilege of serving as the Assistant Secretary of Commerce at the Department of Commerce and the International Trade Administration. And I just want to say what a great privilege and honor it is to be with you this morning. I'm looking out over the audience and I see a lot of old friends and colleagues who I've worked with over the last 3.5 years of the administration. So welcome to all of you. And thank you for the opportunity to be with you this morning to share with you some of the important work that the administration is doing, as you've heard already from our distinguished cabinet leaders in the area of export promotion, and more importantly in the effort to really deepen our ties with the Americas. I have to say, as an American of Latino heritage who was born and raised on the U.S.-Mexico border, I've had the up-close, first-hand experiences of witnessing the power of the Latino community and the Latino small business community in particular. And I understand personally how important the Latino business community is as a driver of our economic growth. And this is something that's very well understood by the President as well. So I look out and I see many of you who are key leaders in that community, and I thank you for the service that you're providing and the leadership that you're showing and the initiative that you're taking and being with us this morning. I'm going to try to keep my remarks brief. You've heard already, I think, substantially about our export promotion efforts from Ambassador Kirk and from Administrator Mills. Let me just echo and reiterate a couple of key points and share with you a few words about what the Department of Commerce specifically is doing as one of the lead agencies in coordinating the President's National Export Initiative. The NEI, as we call it, is the President's commitment for us to double exports over a short period of 5 years by 2014. But really, I like to say that the NEI is not just about doubling exports, it's about deepening our economic engagement in the world. When you consider that 95% of the world's consumers exist outside of the borders of the United States. And the World Bank and the IMF forecast that about 90% of world economic growth will happen outside the territory of the United States. You realize, as the President does, that if we're going to compete as a nation, we've got to engage in global markets. If we're going to restore our preeminence in manufacturing and competitiveness, we have got to engage in foreign markets. And this is why the President launched the NEI, which is a government-wide, cabinet-wide initiative, which all of us are committed to making a reality. When you think about the fact that exports currently make up only about 12.5% of our GDP, and compare that to some of our competitors like China in excess of 40%, Germany close to 50%, Mexico over 50%, you realize how important it is that we really get our best selves in the game in the export market. And that's what the Commerce Department and our colleagues in the interagency are so happy to be doing with this National Export Initiative. Latin America, you don't need me to tell you, you've heard already, is a critical market for us as a whole. Let me just give you a couple of very specific facts to put it in context. This is a $700 billion trade relationship for the United States, supporting millions of American jobs. Over 40%, as you've heard, of our exports go to Latin America. We export more than 3 times the amount to Latin America as we do to China. So for all the world, all the talk that you hear these days about our relationship with China, you realize this is a preeminent market for the United States. Just to give you one specific example, our exports to Mexico alone exceed our exports to all of the BRIC nations combined. This is a $460 billion trade relationship. So it's a very powerful engine of economic growth. And it's important for all of us in the Latino American community know this. And I want you to understand that the President and this administration also understands how important this is to our own economic growth, to our economic competitiveness, and to our ability to compete, not just in the region, but in the world at large. So what are we doing about it? How are we engaging small businesses and American companies, especially Latino-owned businesses, to drive exports and drive economic engagement to the region? At the Department of Commerce through the NEI, we really have 2 principal goals. One of them is to support U.S. companies, especially small businesses, to help them export to the region. And the second is to really help build the capacity and the competitiveness of the region as a whole. Now, with respect to supporting companies, you've already heard Administrator Mills talk extensively about the excellent and terrific work that the SBA is doing to expand financing opportunities and to provide capacity building assistance to small businesses to help them develop business plans and export strategies. But in addition, it's important that we provide SMEs, that we provide small businesses with the connectivity that they need, with market intelligence, with opportunities to connect with export opportunities in the Americas. The Department of Commerce through the International Trade Administration has over 109 U.S. domestic export assistance centers all around the country with commercial service professionals who have deep market expertise and intelligence. And part of what we're trying to do is really help small business, especially Latino-owned businesses, learn about and connect to these export opportunities. Many of our export assistance centers are located in regions with strong Latino populations, all along the U.S.-Mexico border, along the East Coast, the West Coast. Everywhere there's a significant Hispanic presence, and you know that's just about everywhere in the country these days, you'll find a U.S. Export Assistance Center. Our goal is to help small businesses, and especially Latino-owned businesses, take full advantage of the trade agreements that Ambassador Kirk and his team at USTR have worked so hard to negotiate and bring to fruition. In addition, we're doing specific targeted outreach to the Hispanic business community. I personally and Undersecretary Francisco Sanchez, who's sorry he can't be here today, he's on his way to the summit in Cartagena. We've really fanned out across the nation, meeting with the numbers of Hispanic chambers of commerce. I've been in El Paso, in San Diego, in Albuquerque, in Atlanta, you name it. We've been all over the country reaching out to the Hispanic business community to make sure they're aware of these incredible opportunities that exist for trade with the Americas. In addition to our domestic resources, we have 128 foreign commercial offices and embassies and consulates all over the world. And those of you who know me know that I'm on the road about 80% of the time, crisscrossing the globe, trying to make sure that we are engaging our trading partners and opening markets and creating opportunities. Once these trade agreements are in place, and of course there are many markets where we don't have trade agreements, we want to make sure that we're working with our trading partners to create a level playing field for American companies, especially small businesses and Latino-owned businesses, to take full advantage of these new market opportunities. One of the most important things that we do is we organize trade missions. And with respect to the Americas, I'm very pleased to say that since 2010, we've organized 29. There have been 29 trade missions that have gone to the Americas just since 2010. I was pleased to lead a trade mission to Mexico just this past January. And it's really an incredible opportunity, especially for small businesses who have an opportunity to travel with a senior Department of Commerce official and gain exposure to the market, make critical introductions, connect up with the resources that we have through the embassies and consulates, and really help small businesses gain access to markets in a way they frankly could never do on their own. So we are very engaged in targeting key markets, key sectors, and key opportunities to help drive this economic engine that is represented by the Americas. The last thing I just want to touch on is the efforts that we're doing to really build the capacity, the connectivity, and the competitiveness of the region as a whole. You know, increasingly, I think as Ambassador Kirk alluded to, the United States does not stand alone. We've got to compete regionally, we've got to compete as a region. The North America platform, for example, is itself an important economic engine. The level of co-production and integration that exists in the economies between the United States, Canada, and Mexico is significant. We want to extend our reach in the region. We want to build partnerships with our trading partners throughout the Americas and take advantage of some natural synergies that exist that allow us to compete as a region against some of the other regional trading blocs globally. So part of what we're doing, frankly, through the Department of Commerce in consultation with our partners at USTR is to really build capacity for competitiveness and innovation throughout the Americas. The Department of Commerce was very pleased to organize several years ago the Americas Competitiveness Forum, which is one of the premier gatherings of Western Hemisphere leaders to talk about the sharing of best practices to drive competitiveness and innovation throughout the region. We're also working on promoting trade facilitation, customs facilitation, and also human workforce development. Just a few weeks ago, we hosted a conference at Georgetown University where we brought universities and community colleges from throughout the region together here at Georgetown to talk about how to build the capacity of our workforce, because we understand that a key driver of competitiveness is workforce development. So my point is that whether it's working one-on-one with small businesses to help you gain the capacity, the tools, the expertise, the market intelligence that you need to access these markets, to expand access to capital as the Ex-Im Bank and the Small Business Administration is doing, or working overseas with our partners to build capacity to create a more level playing field for American companies. The U.S. government under President Obama's leadership has a all-hands-on-deck effort to really strengthen our relationship in the Americas, to strengthen your competitive position, and to provide you as small business owners with the resources and the tools that you need. I have to tell you, it's really an honor and a privilege for me personally, given my connection, my personal history and roots in the region, to have the opportunity to work on these issues with such distinguished colleagues throughout the administration. And you'll see from some of the speakers later on in the panel how many great leaders we have in this administration. I'm looking out and I see, whether it's at the State Department, the IDB, the Defense Department, USTR, we have Hispanic Americans, Latino Americans serving in very senior positions across the administration. That's something I think that speaks very well of the President and his commitment to this community. So I thank you very much for your attention. I want to leave time for some questions and look forward to engaging with you in a good dialogue. Thanks very much.
Well, thank you, Secretary Comunez, and thank you, Ambassador Kirk and Administrator Mills, for your comments. After a round of discussion here at the table, we are going to go to all of you and give you the opportunity to ask questions. We do have a good amount of time, and so we have the opportunity to explore some of the issues that have already come up. But I want to start with Ambassador Kirk. Mr. Ambassador, I think you quite rightfully talked about Latin America as a real area of opportunity for the U.S., and you talked a little bit about the trade agreements that you've been instrumental in moving forward. And I guess the question would be, how can U.S. trade policy going forward take advantage of the growing middle classes in the Western Hemisphere and the markets that we see and the areas of opportunity that we've heard about? How can, from your position as the head of USTR, our trade policy really advance those issues?
Well, first of all, our principal objective is just to help you find new customers. I don't know how many, I know there's a mix of leaders here, but I mean, those of you that are in business or entrepreneurs, can we just get some idea? Show of hands. I mean, the most fundamental principle of business forever, you know, has been location, location, location. You want to be where people could buy your product. Now, that used to be more limited by physical proximity before we had, you know, the explosive changes in transportation. Less so once we began to do more business by the internet. But Michael said one thing that really is important. We're in a world now that 95% of the world's potential customers live somewhere other than the United States. That's not a bad thing. That's an opportunity for us. And what we want to do is just give you access to them. What our challenge is, if I can quickly, is that many Americans had begun to sour on the value proposition of trade. We clearly recognize that trade makes it cheaper for us to run our businesses, feed our families, clothe them. But what we heard when we came in office was more Americans, no matter where they lived, feeling like if all we're going to get are, you know, fresh produce from Chile in the winter and cheaper T-shirts and laptops, but the jobs are all going to go somewhere else, we don't know if we want much of this trade thing. So one, part of our mission has been to help America understand, as counterintuitive as it is, because our markets are so open. And we, for the most part, let people send goods and services here because America operates on a fundamental principle. We should get out of the way between you and what you want to buy for your business or your family and make that as cheap as possible. Almost every trade agreement that we enter now, if you think about it, we're negotiating down the cost for us to sell to them. So in almost every case, whether it's the agreements with Colombia, Panama, or Korea, what we're doing is lowering their tariffs and barriers, and whatever you're selling, it just makes it cheaper to sell to them. The other side of what we do is enforcing our agreements to make sure they live up to them. I just want to do one thing real quick because I saw some of you, we have a bad habit in Washington, assuming you all have memorized the Washington glossary of, you know, using all these acronyms. A number of you, when Michael used the term BRICS and he talked about how much we export to Mexico. And Mexico, understand, Mexico and Canada still our biggest trade partners and our best. Both of those are about $1.5 billion relationships every day of the year. But you'll hear the term the BRICS a lot. That's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Because generally these are the emerging markets. And everybody in the world knows this. It's no secret because they've all got roughly 400, 500, 600 million people who live on less than $2 a day that they're trying to move into a more mainstream lifestyle. That's where new consumers are. But to simplify it, just think about is all we're trying to do is help you find new customers, make it cheaper for you to go there. But the other important element of when we do a trade agreement, particularly for small businesses, we're usually asking them to bring their legal standards at least up to ours, particularly those of you in technology. If you're concerned about piracy and counterfeiting, labor laws, we want to make sure that our trade agreements aren't an inducement for somebody to move production somewhere where people don't have rules against, you know, hiring child labor. So our agreements try to give you that level playing field, and then working with Karen and Michael's team, we try to help you find the customers and finance them. The other thing is one website for you to all keep in mind is pretty simple. It's export.gov. So if you forget all of this and you want to follow up and say, I want to learn more, just remember to look up either export.gov or the new one at Commerce Business, USA.gov.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. And Administrator Mills, let's keep on that theme for just a moment. You mentioned technology, and the Ambassador has mentioned technology changing patterns of trade and various things. Can you give us a sense from your perspective on how the small and medium-sized business community is really taking advantage of changes in technology to take advantage of some of these growing markets in the Western Hemisphere?
Well, I think that, I thought you were going a different direction. I thought you were going to say all these technology companies are exporting, which they are. But actually, every kind of company is exporting.
Absolutely.
And companies that you wouldn't think, you know, have the potential to export actually do. We were at a jeans manufacturer in Raleigh-Durham. It's called Raleigh Denim. And what were they doing with their jeans, their high-end jeans? They were producing them here in North Carolina and selling them all over the world, to Asia, to Europe, to South America. So we know that small businesses today have a different set of opportunities than they did even 5-10 years ago. And there are a number of things that if you are exporting or interested in exporting, you know are different issues. There's a language you have to learn, there's a set of activities, a compliance that you have to go through, and we are doing two things. We are trying to make that simpler, and the Department of Commerce has taken some very strong steps at sort of simplifying the rules about what you can and can't export, and the paperwork that's involved in reporting. And then what we're trying to do is make it easier for you to connect to customers. And there's a whole range of ways that, of course, technology is helping. But one of the ways in this community that we've seen is that we actually physically can connect markets, people to markets, more effectively. And this is one of the things I mentioned at San Antonio, the University of Texas. We have a piece of our small business development centers that have developed the capacity to help you find your market, understand your market. So if you say, gee, I think my products would do well in South America, which of the markets, maybe under the new free trade agreements, would have more customers for me? There is a way to come into this global environment and get a market analysis to understand those markets. So we are using all of this expertise. The sticking point, the hard thing, really seems to be in getting the small business started down the path. And that's why the advisor, the mentor, the one-on-one relationship seems to be important. Small business owners are very busy. You can come and look at look it up, and whatever, by the way, whatever portal you go through, export.gov, Business USA, we are making it seamless. So you will get to the same set of information. And what we want to do is make sure that as you search for what it is you're interested in, whether it's markets or market opportunities, you can find them. But the second piece is we have a lot of hands-on advice. So our small business development centers and our SCORE partners, very often you can find your way to somebody who's actually operated in those markets. And they will connect you to the distributors, to the compliance officers, to somebody, and to the banks who know what you're trying to do. And that has proven the most valuable piece of maybe non-technological help that we can give.
Yeah, and I really like the way you brought in the financing aspect of those issues too, because from a small, medium-sized business perspective, those are oftentimes the critical issues and very, very relevant. So thank
Eric,
you.
can I just add
Please.
one thing
No,
quickly
please.
I
Yeah.
neglected to do, and particularly since, and I know others of you export, but for someone like Jose, whose business is principally exporting, when Karen and I go around the country, we really do hear from you all, and a lot of what we've tried to do is put more information on the web. But anyway, Jose, if you don't know, we now have a free tariff tool online for every FTA we have with the tariff schedule, and it's free to make it simpler. And that way, wherever you're exporting, you can now go online and to anybody else exporting, and you'll know I sell this. Here's what they charge me or they don't charge me, and that makes it much easier, again, particularly for smaller businesses that are selling to other countries. And all of this is available online free.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, Assistant Secretary Comunez, you talked about Mexico a lot. You talked about North America, the platform, shared production, and those sorts of issues, and I completely agree with you. From the perspective of building out North America as a co-production location or geographic entity, can you give us a sense of some of the priorities that the Commerce Department and the Obama administration are really looking to do to help encourage business people to look at North America as a more integrated economic space?
You bet, and you've touched on a topic that's near and dear to my heart, and I really give the President a lot of credit for the leadership that he's shown with President Calderon and with Prime Minister Harper on this. With respect to Mexico specifically, though, the President, during President Calderon's state visit a couple of years ago, launched the 21st Century Border Management Initiative. So it starts with how do we facilitate the flow of goods across our borders more efficiently, and looking at our borders not so much as a place, as a line that separates us, but as a place to facilitate commerce and trade, and taking shared responsibility for our infrastructure and for the secure flow of goods and people. So we have prioritized our engagement with Mexico on trade facilitation along the border through the 21st Century Border Management Initiative, which I think is very, very important to facilitating greater trade. Another thing that we're doing, and I know this probably makes a lot of people's eyes glaze over because it sounds so bureaucratic, but if you talk to business owners, one of the big challenges they face is the divergence between the way countries regulate products. So regulatory cooperation becomes very, very important. And with Mexico, given the extent of co-production and integration in our economies, we've really prioritized trying to take a harmonized approach to regulations to make sure that we're sharing a commitment to protecting standards, the environment, and of course human safety and health, but also trying to be proactive, especially in the area of new and emerging technologies, regulating in a way that promotes and fosters innovation, like for example with the smart grids or all of the technology that's coming up around new ICT, new information communications technology, making sure that we take very consistent approaches to regulation. So we have launched a high-level regulatory cooperation forum, which has as its primary responsibility regulatory cooperation. And then finally, I'm very proud of the work that we're doing through what we call our border export strategy. For many of you who know that the national media really seems obsessed with telling a story about violence along the U.S.-Mexico border and characterizing our relationship with Mexico purely through the lens of narco-trafficking, arms trafficking, illegal crossings, and completely missing the reality that our relationship with Mexico is a $460 billion economic engine that really drives tremendous economic growth and opportunity. There's an entire ecosystem along the U.S.-Mexico border that is central to our economic recovery. So one of the things that we're doing is we're promoting a border export strategy. I've been down to the border now 4 or 5 times. I'll be back the first week of June with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, taking a group of companies from Tijuana and San Diego to El Paso and Juarez, and ending up in Laredo, Nuevo Laredo, and going down to Monterrey, where I was just in December on a trade mission, to really shine a spotlight on the economic vitality that is the U.S.-Mexico border. So I think through a combination of policy tools, border and customs facilitation, focusing on infrastructure and the free flow of goods, and also just good old-fashioned trade promotion, really showing a different side and a different face of the border. We're really calling attention to the tremendous economic partnership that the United States has and is invested in with Mexico. And of course, it doesn't stop with Mexico. That's a gateway to Latin America, but that's a good, concrete example of an opportunity that's right in our own backyard.
Well, terrific. Thank you for those comments, and which I appreciate very much. Well, we have the opportunity to go to all of you now for your questions, short comments perhaps, but we'd prefer a focus on questions. I believe we have circulating microphones or stand-up microphones in the back. Yeah, here we go. We have circulating microphones. So if you could wait to be recognized, we have 2.
Here, and right here in the front row.
No, we have 2.
Front row, right
I'm sorry. I saw 2 over here.
Yeah.
There was a
And you got
well, please. All right.
Never mind.
All right. We'll go 1 and 2 and 3. All right.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Monica Mantilla. I'm the president and CEO of Altura Capital Group, and I'm also a board member of New America Alliance, an organization of successful Hispanic entrepreneurs. My question to you, first of all, before I ask a question, I must recognize and commend the work of the Obama administration, all of you up there, and so many of the agencies that have worked tirelessly to make sure that small businesses in our country have a real opportunity for progress and change. I think that that is a work that has been, that shows, and I really want to commend you for that work. My question to you is about the still remaining gap. And let me share with you just very quickly some of the statistics that I think are very compelling when we think about Hispanic business owners. According to the Department of Commerce and a research that was put together by Department of Commerce and MBDA, there's around 44,000 Hispanic businesses that sell more than $1 million, right? So these are like sort of the businesses that are over a certain threshold that are already, selling more than $1 million. They, in aggregate, produce revenues of around $300 billion, and they employ around 1.1 million. They create 1.1 million jobs. The parity is not there, because if we compare that to the real opportunity these businesses should have, the parity research shows that those firms should be at 1.4 trillion in sales. So we're talking about, we're at 0.3, we should be at 1.4. And the research also shows that those businesses clearly have the potential to do 4 to 5 times more employment generation than they are today. So my sense is that first, with everything the SBA has done, with everything a number of agencies, Department of Commerce, with all your export initiatives that I really think are absolutely outstanding, half of it is us really getting to know about all of those initiatives and rolling our sleeves and working together. And MBDA, David Hinson, just gave us a speech with Karen a week ago in New York. And it was incredibly empowering, and I think that there's a huge opportunity there. But the second gap is, I do believe that if we think about existing capacity, and this is a question for Karen and for Mike as well, when you think about the existing capacity that the Department of Commerce and that the SBA has, how much are we using? Is it that you're at capacity and then we have to ask our legislators to give you 3, 4, 5 times more budget so that you can continue to do the good work? Or where are you capacity-wise? Are you maxed up and you need more? Or are we just not using what you have out there? And thank you for the opportunity to be the first question.
Thank you very much. And let's take a round so we can get several in. And there was a question right here on the aisle, please.
Hi. Well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity of being here. I'm from Monterrey, Mexico, an entrepreneur over there. And, China has increased its transportation cost and labor force cost. And this gives like a very big opportunity for America, imports to the United States. So how can you leverage this future increase in the imports in order to increase the exports to America and get your objective of doubling the exports?
Very good. And there was a question here of the gentleman in the yellow tie.
Again, thank you for the opportunity. My name is Albert Rodriguez, or I should say Alberto Rodriguez originally. And with Ambient Technologies, thank you to the Department of Commerce for the opportunity through George Martinez, which you might know him, helped us establish our presence in Panama. My question here is simply the fact that we have been doing very well in the, working on the Panama Canal Enlargement Project, and we have done some work in Colombia. One of the challenges that we have is the constant changing requirements of each country. So we will need help with that. I mean, legal requirements, establishing in the country, establishing even a bank account, even, all the things that take a huge effort that is a huge expense for a small business. That's my first question. How can you help us with that? Because we want to establish a presence in Colombia. That's our next major market, where we already done some work. We do geophysical, geotechnical, environmental work. We have been lucky to do very large, $250 project in Colombia recently. Thanks, again, help with the U.S. Department of Commerce. But the issue, the other issue is, how do you see green technologies? We are establishing an emerging side, a division in our company, which isn't headed by me, so that's part of the issue here, that we feel Latin America has a huge need of alternative energies such as solar, which would help tremendously. I was one of the people that witnessed the huge effect that wireless technologies had in Latin America during the heydays of course, Bell South. I worked for Bell South for 7.5 years. I see the same thing happening with distributed energy. And I talked to a couple of the people here that agreed from, Sebastian and a person from Brazil that agreed to that also, that this is a necessary thing that needs to happen. So those are my two major issues. Is your emphasis in green technologies, and how can you help us with the internal requirements of a country?
Yeah, thank you very much. Those are important questions. I want to start with Ambassador Kirk, actually, on the last one in terms of green technologies, because you've done a lot in terms of trade policy globally on this, and perhaps you can start us off with that.
We will, and then you'll forgive me, I'm going to try to respond to you and the gentleman from Monterrey quickly, because I have to leave to get something for the boss before he goes to Cartagena, and I think you want to talk more to them. I understand Alberto, there's going to be, I think, an entire panel on green technology. One of the elements that you've heard President Obama say over and over again about building an economy built to last and competing to win is playing to our strengths. And the reality, we are moving up the manufacturing chain and the more knowledge-based, entrepreneurial, value-added, innovative products, and certainly in the green technology sector, that's huge. Within every forum that we engage our trade partners, whether it's trilaterally, which would be something like NAFTA, when President Obama just hosted President Calderon from Mexico and Prime Minister Cameron of Canada Monday. Harper. I do better with Calderon than Harper. Anyway, every forum we do, we're talking about how we can make it easier to promote and do green energy. We are part of a broader initiative in the Pacific called APEC. It's the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperative. One of our principal initiatives is to have a reduction of tariffs on environmental goods, because these should be shared. The gentleman from Monterrey raised an issue, and there was an article in the paper this week, and you'll start hearing this term in the business lexicon more and more, and it's called insourcing. And the best thing is it's being driven by you, not the government. But what we are finding is that, there was a period of time 20 years ago, American businesses decided to go to places like China, Malaysia, or whatever, because there were hundreds of millions of workers who'd work for $2 a day. Transportation costs were cheaper. But what we're beginning to find is, in many cases, and not just China, but in many countries, while it's cheaper to get the workers there, because they don't have the same respect for copyright, intellectual property, and they just, frankly, I'm sorry, I'm from Texas. I don't believe in imitation being the sincerest form of flattery. When it's my business, that's theft. But what we're finding is that our productivity's gone up. More and more businesses are saying, because of what Michael said, we have an integrated structure in the U.S. with our productivity, our cost, but our rule of law. More and more businesses are finally deciding, you know what, I think I'm going to just go ahead and make this here in North America, in the United States. So it's the beginning of a trend. You aren't seeing a lot, but we've got furniture manufacturers. We've got high-tech, particularly those of you in the tech sector that have found out how damaging it can be to go in the wrong market and have somebody steal your product. That's the biggest impact of what we're seeing. But again, forgive me, I have to run to another meeting. Everything that we're sharing with you all today, you can access through one of the websites we have mentioned to you all, and we would hope you'd pick up the phone, call us, let us know how we can work with you and help. And then finally, just remember, our diversity, sometimes we overlook, is the biggest marketing tool we have. There is not a country in the world that President Obama can't go and have someone in his cabinet, in part of one of the business delegations that Michael leads, help us understand what it's like to do business in Mexico, Colombia, Panama with somebody from that country here. And you all know all business is still personal. Never lose sight of the power we have to help drive our economy because of the strength of our diversity. But thank you all for letting me be a part of the program.
Can I just perhaps build on the question on China? I think to go back to the theme of both the Summit of the Americas and of this conference today, which is the connecting the Americas. I think that in addition to the factors that Ambassador Kirk mentioned, it's really a policy priority for the United States to help build the competitive capacity of the Americas and the connectivity of the Americas. In some of our panels you'll hear today, connectivity really means both physical connectivity, facilitating the flow of commerce and goods, ports, making it easy for us to connect markets physically as well as technologically, and of course metaphorically with cultural and educational and innovative ties. So I think that as the Americas strengthen in terms of our integrated, in terms of the extent to which we're integrated, we will continue to compete and draw additional sources of manufacturing to the Americas as a region, and I think that's one of the goals of this upcoming summit. So with respect, sir, to your question about your interest in Colombia, what I would say is let's talk offline. We certainly have professionals in our embassy there. With the Colombia Free Trade Agreement coming online, there's enormous interest in how to take better advantage of the Colombian market. I encourage you to do that. We've got foreign commercial officers in Colombia who are on the ground who can help you. Now, on the U.S. side, the SBA, as you've heard, has great domestic resources, as does the Commerce Department through our export assistance centers. But if you're looking for assistance overseas in market, our commercial service officers can help you with that.
Thank you. Administrator Mills, we'll give you the last word of this panel, so still several issues out there, please.
Thank you, yes, and I'll come to this issue of fast-growing businesses. But I want Dario Gomez to stand up. He's 2 seats away, and he can actually help connect you to those people, those specific people in your marketplace or your region, or you can go online, as we said, and just type in your zip code, and you will also get assistance. There was a very interesting point raised, though, about what we call the missing middle. Those businesses, Hispanic-owned businesses, and it's true also in women-owned businesses, above $1 million. And one of the things that we've seen is that we now have lots of new business starts, great increases in the amount of entrepreneurship, but they hit, whether it's a glass ceiling or just a set of barriers where it's hard to grow the business. And there are a number of reasons for that. Access to capital has certainly been an issue. We at the SBA make loans that the market won't make, but that are still good and strong loans. And it won't surprise anybody that we are 3 to 5 times more likely to make a loan to a minority-owned business or a woman-owned business than a conventional lender. So we have stepped into a number of gaps to provide access and opportunity to take businesses to the next level. And then we're back to counseling and advice. And one of the things that we have done is try to create doors in every community, and you participate in this. We want our CDFIs, our Community Development Financial Institutions, now have access to 7A loan guarantees. We want to make sure our micro-lenders are in every region, and so that there's access and opportunity. Whatever door you walk through, you will get advice, counseling, and credit. And then when you're ready to go to the next level, the next banking relationship, that bank is there, that continuum is there. And we are, I think, very happy with the support that we have gotten from Congress over the last 3 years passing the Small Business Jobs Act, passing permanent SBIR, and passing in the last week also some help for young companies wanting to go public, or Main Street businesses who want to raise money in their community through this crowdfunding. So it applies to fast-growing businesses and also to community businesses. Through all of these tools, our biggest challenge right now is getting that help into your hands, to making sure that people know about the continuum of help that's available. Different businesses at different stages need different kinds of tools. And we have that continuum now. We have fixed the paperwork and streamlined it. We've fixed the turnaround times. We've made more points of access. We've connected them on the internet. Now we are in the moment of making sure that all of you know about it, that you use it, and that we help you grow your businesses.
Well, I only have one regret for this panel, and that's that we don't have more time to continue it, because I think these comments have been very, very well made. They've been very informative and quite strategic, I must say, as well, looking forward in terms of ways to increase the connectivity of the Americas, exports, relationships between the United States on the business side and otherwise. So thank you for your comments. I think after this panel, we have a short break, but before we get there, we have one final item of business, and that's if I could ask all of you to please join me in thanking our panelists for their wonderful comments.